talking about foreknowledge and free will. One standard solution is that he gets his knowledge from what we do. So you're painting a picture where he can see from outside everything that goes on, and he sees that frame in which I make the decision. That's how he knows what I do. What's crucial to that idea is that he knows because I do. I do by my own, I have free will, and he watches me and picks up the information about what I do from watching me do what I do. That's a standard solution. Saadia Gaon mentions it in the Ezmunah Tzedeus. Kenneth Yitzchak mentions it. I'll go into the details of how it solves the problem, but it is a standard solution. Taking it out of the past and putting it into an area where there's no time is a way of making that intuitive, and it's useful. I don't think it's logically necessary, but it is useful. So I think what you're saying is accurate. It is a way to look at it. I don't know how it relates to the rabbis who reported to me, but I do give this in my shiurim on free will. So I think it's perfectly okay. As I started to say before, Bertrand Russell said this 100 years ago. He said, don't try to beat up the religious believer with foreknowledge and free will, because you can always say that God yesterday looked ahead to see what tomorrow would be like, and that's how he knows what I will do. So you put God outside of time. He thought of the idea that God inside time could look ahead to tomorrow also. But it's the same idea. The crucial idea is he gets his knowledge from what I do. If that's the case, then his knowledge puts no limits on what I can do. That's an accurate way to do it.
But also, Hashem exists. Hashem saw already the end of time and the beginning of time, and Hashem saw it says Hashem saw everything in between. And Hashem saw it many thousands and millions of years ago, because for him there's no nafkamina. For him it's all like, for us we have to live one moment for the next, but he could see what's going to happen in the future, but he already did it a million years ago.
You see, that's not going to be very good, because you have to make up your mind how you're talking about God altogether. If you put God outside of time, then don't tell me he saw it a million years ago. For him, there is no million years ago. There's just, as you said, all time spread out in front of him. Even to say, which some people do, that since God is outside of time, past, present, and future are all simultaneous for him is wrong, because simultaneous is a way of talking about time. If you put him outside, then he's outside. He's really outside. Then don't use any time language to talk about him. Don't talk about millions of years ago. For him, there is no millions of years ago. So only for us, because we're stuck at a time.
God has no concept of time.
That doesn't follow. It doesn't follow. There's
no
concept.
No concept of time by God.
No. That's just too vague to be understood. The fact that I'm outside a certain reality doesn't mean I can't have any concept of it. I'm not a number. No, that doesn't mean I can't have a concept of numbers. Well, one thing has nothing to do with the other. With your concepts, you can describe things which you can't possibly be. There's no question of conceptual limitation. God can have any concepts you like. Okay, this is open Q&A, boys and girls. So I'm just here to answer questions, the ones that I'm capable of answering. I'll tell you one thing, but if after that there are no more questions, I do have other things to do. This is Parsha Phinehas. Phinehas killed a Jew and his paramour, non-Jewish girlfriend, who paraded their relationship in public in order to embarrass Moses and in order to lower Jewish moral standards. He killed them rightfully. He's given a reward. Bris kuhunas olam, a covenant of eternal priesthood. Now, Phinehas is a grandson of Aaron. The priests are Aaron's family, Aaron's descendants. So the question arises, why does he need to be given position of priest in this incident? And some say that when Aaron and his descendants were made priests, the rule went like this. Aaron is a priest. His children are priests. And all future offspring will be priests. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
All future offspring will be priests. But at that time, Phinehas was already born. So he doesn't count as a future offspring. So at that point, when the original rule was set down, Aaron is a high priest, his children are priests, all the future generations will be priests, which would be Phinehas' cousins, maybe brothers, and Phinehas is excluded. Phinehas is excluded. He's out. The whole family, the whole clan are priests, and he's excluded. Reason? None. No reason. Everybody's in, and you're out. Black X on your forehead, out. Okay, now there's a public challenge to Moses, who set up this rule. Public challenge to Moses' authority, to Moses' honor. Who is going to be the one to rise up and protect Moses' honor? I think we would understand it very well if Phinehas said, get somebody else. Don't ask me to do this. I've been injured, discriminated against, unfairly excluded with no explanation. I'm going my way, let him go his way. Who needs him? Who needs it? I think that would be a very popular, common reaction today. If not to get the ACLU after him or something. Phinehas is the one who stands up and says, this is a crime, and it has to be punished. He's the one who stands up to avenge Moses' honor in this incident. I think that's very remarkable. It's a very remarkable detachment from my fortunes and my honor and my glory and my status to look at the incident in objective terms. And indeed, there were people who, in certain respects, were greater than Phinehas, and they didn't act. And oral tradition says that, in a certain sense, the information was hidden from them to give him this opportunity to act, to be the one to act, to show how he took his exclusion. That if it came from Moses, it's got to be true, it has to be reliable, it has to be coming from God, there has to be a reason for it. I trust there's a reason for it, and I put my own honor, my own interest on the side. That's a very, very courageous thing to do. Far more courageous than killing Zimri and Cosby. And for that, he gets a covenant of eternal priesthood. Now, the function of a priest is to bring peace between God and the Jewish people. That's his job. So that if he sees a rupture between God and the Jewish people, for him, that's an existential tragedy that just can't be passed over in silence. Something has to be done about it. And if it's a question of standing up for Moses, even though you have been disadvantaged by Moses, that plays no role. For a person like Phinehas, that really plays no role. He simply elevates himself above that, and he does what has to be done for God and for Moses. It's very interesting. There's a Pritzadik who quotes a Midrash. The Midrash says that when Phinehas killed the Jewish man and the non-Jewish woman, some of the lower leaders of the people started to make fun of him. They started to denigrate him, pull him down. They said, let's see, who is Phinehas? Phinehas is the son of Elazar. Who's Elazar's wife? Elazar's wife was a daughter of Yisro, one of the sisters of Moses' wife. Yisro was a Midianite from a non-Jewish source. So that means that on his mother's side, Phinehas is a grandson of a Midianite. And these leaders said, how is it that Moses didn't kill them? Aaron didn't kill them? Aaron's sons didn't kill them? Joshua didn't kill them? There were great people there. They didn't do it. Only Phinehas did it. Well, he's not greater than they are. He's not greater than they are. So there must be something else about him that's unique that led him to do it. And they traced it back to his non-Jewish grandfather from Midian, because, especially in Kabbalistic terms, Midian is associated with anger and violence. They said, that's it. That's why he did it, because he traces his lineage back to Midian. Now, the Pri Tzaddik says, on the one hand, this is grossly unfair. Phinehas is a great hero. On the other hand, these are not stupid people. They're not trivial people. If they said it traces back to the fact he's the grandson of a Midianite, that can't just be wrong. It can't just be a fantasy. There has to be some truth to it, even though it can't be the whole story. And as a matter of fact, this week's Parsha starts with the lineage of Phinehas tracing him back to Aaron, not back to Midian. That doesn't mean it isn't true, but why does the Chumash this week start with tracing him back to Aaron when 10 verses before, at the end of last week's Parsha, you have the same lineage there, the exact same lineage? What do you need it twice for? So the Pri Tzaddik says something very profound. He says, a person inherits qualities from his ancestry. You inherit qualities from your ancestry, they should be raw material. They should be capacities, abilities, strengths, talents, which you decide how to use. You decide how to put them to purpose in pursuing what you need to pursue. Yes, the reason that Phinehas was able to take the action that he did was because he had in him a lineage that comes from Midian. But the purpose of using that capacity for strong, vigorous, and destructive anger was governed by being a grandson of Aaron. Aaron was a person who was dedicated to peace. Chazal tell us that Aaron pursued peace under all circumstances. Indeed, one of the famous things that Aaron used to do was he saw two people fighting. He'd go to one and say, you know something? I know the fellow you're fighting with. He really would like to make peace with you. He's a little embarrassed and he's worried about saving face over what happened in the past, but he really would like to make peace with you. Find a way to compromise. He'd be very happy to do that. And then he'd go to the other one and tell him the same thing. And in our terms, that's not a lie, because your soul really does want to make peace. Okay, you've overlaid it with shellac and veneer of anger and judgment, and he's all wrong, and he's criminal, and so on and so on. But, so this is who Aaron is. Aaron is a person who wants to make peace. What Phinehas sees here is that by killing these criminals, peace between God and the Jewish people could be restored. So he takes that capacity for aggressive action and uses it in the service of peace. Let me give you a crude analogy. Let's imagine you're a physician, and one of your jobs as a surgeon is to amputate limbs with gangrene. Not everybody can cut off somebody's foot. Not everybody can do it. People just faint, go to pieces. They just can't look it in the face. Some people have that ability. They can pull themselves together and focus and are able to do that. If you use that ability in order to cut off a gangrenous limb and save someone's life, then your ability to harden yourself, steel yourself, and cut off somebody's foot can save lives. So that's the idea of Phinehas. Phinehas has that aggressive side to him, but it was in the service of his lineage from Aaron, which was someone who stood for establishing peace, maintaining peace. Similarly, he points out, the Pri Tzaddik points out that Ovadia, who was a prophet, his lineage went back to Edom, And he was chosen by God to give a prophecy to Edom. God chose the person who came from that lineage to address that problem in that context because he had it in him. Of course, he was a prophet. That's one of the greatest Jewish people in the history of the world. But he did it. It was used to address Edom. Now, this is a very important lesson for us, for all Jews really, but especially for those who come from an outside background. There is a natural thought that I'm grafting myself onto something new. I'm changing my direction, my focus, my priorities, and my past probably is just going to drag me down. My past is going to be a terrible liability because in my past, I wasn't dedicated to the things that I think now are important. That's really not correct. It's really not correct. And it violates a fundamental principle of Jewish thought. The background that you had was not by accident. Nothing's by accident. The background that you had put you in a position where you can face the challenges that you have to face. The goal is to see what in your background is raw material for you to be able to face the things that you have to face. Every one of us has to do that. Every one of us grew up in an environment, circumstances, century, country, culture, which God chose for us. There are no accidents. And none of that needs to go to waste. I'll never forget about 25 years ago, a reporter came down from New York Times to interview Rabbi Schiller and other people in Yeshiva about what we're doing here. And I'll never forget, she asked Rabbi Schiller, would you describe yourselves as born-again Jews? And he said, absolutely not. Because born again connotes this idea that I'm brand new. Nothing that happened before is relevant to me anymore. I'm starting afresh. He said, absolutely not. We believe in taking our past with us and using it and elevating it as a platform, so on and so on. Of course, the reporter of the New York Times wrote in the article, Rabbi Schiller says that we are born-again Jews. She just lied. Because I was there when the interview was taking place. I saw her taking notes, and the article came out. The article came out with the exact opposite. Because that's what the New York Times is. It's a propaganda sheet. There's very little of honest reporting, especially about Jewish subjects. So this is one thing that the Pri Tzaddik is stressing, that Phinehas took along his lineage from Midian, but it was under the control or direction of the fact that he was the grandson of Aaron.
How many generations back was it that his great-grandmother married a non-Jewish man?
No, it was his, let's say it again. Phinehas' father
Wasn't Jewish.
No, his father was Elazar. Of course he was. He was the son of Aaron.
No, how many generations back?
No, again, I'll tell you what we're talking about now. If this is Phinehas, you have Aaron and Elazar and Phinehas.
Okay.
That's going back to Aaron, the high priest, right? And this side you have his mother. Now his mother is a daughter of Yisro, the priest of Midian. So it's just grandfather. It's his grandfather on his mother's side. His mother's father. 2 generations. Very close.
So his mother's father wasn't part of the Jewish nation.
That's right. That's right. But of course, that means his mother converted, and we are a nation of converts. So that for us is not a demerit. Not a demerit in any way.
So his whole background, her whole background wasn't Jewish, or
that's right. Until she married Elazar. She, like any convert, grafted herself onto the Jewish people. Yeah. Anything on your minds?
I think the whole the past. What do you mean by that? Like, just take the whole. Sorry. So I mean, like when you do a tshuva or whatever in the past, how are you supposed to not forget about it, but let it go and just move on?
No, I don't think that's right, because to let it go would imply that those past years were wasted. They're not contributing anything to where I'm going and what I'm going to be. And that would mean that they were accidental or of no value. Why then would God have put your soul into that family with those circumstances? We believe that everything that in a person's life is gerrymandered, is created, so as to enable him to face certain challenges. When I was becoming religious, I asked my Rabbi, I was studying in university, studying philosophy, and I asked him, should I give up university and go to college? And, give up university and go to yeshiva and study yeshiva. And he said no. He didn't say the same thing to everybody, but to me he said no. He said, you have to finish, you have to become a professor, you have to become, and teach in university. I didn't know why. I don't know why. I didn't ask why at the time, but I didn't ask why. But of course, having been a professor of philosophy has opened up endless doors that I can get into and other people can't get into. Because nobody can deny my credentials. Whereas someone's just a rabbi, in many people's eyes, has no credentials at all. So it has become absolutely crucial for me. So the Rebbe guided me to use what I was interested in. I loved philosophy before I even heard the word. I just like to think about things, organize my mind, abstractly, and analyze them, define them, and argue about them. I love doing that. And he said, take it along, get your degree, become a professor, and that will be the key to the way in which you can serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I can hear someone saying, in the spirit of what you said, that that's your secular past. That wasn't dedicated to God. Give it up. But that's not so. You don't give it up. Try to use it as a platform with which to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll give you an example that comes out of a much longer shir. You imagine a kid who grows up on the wrong side of the fence with youth gangs, and he fights his way to the top. Jewish kids who fights his way to the top. That's my prejudice. And then he goes to the army, and the army kicks sense into him. He comes out, and he's straight, understands. You have to be honest, you have to work to contribute to society. Goes to the police academy. He gets a degree in law enforcement. Now it's a question of assigning him to work. And he says, assign me to youth gangs. I know that very well. I know what they do, I know their strategies, I know what they want, I know the strengths, I know the weaknesses. Assign me there, and I'll do fine. I'll do something creative, I'll do something good. Maybe he could also become an accountant, but then he wouldn't be using his past to do something positive in the future. I think that's a fundamental idea. I think it's how you serve God out of love. Where when you love someone, you want to bring all of yourself into the relationship. You don't have to cut off half of yourself and say, that's not worthy. You want to bring all of yourself in. In this case, when you're serving God out of love, you bring all of your past in with you as well. So it's a general theme.
Our whole life should be about serving God.
Yes, that's right.
Why did God create the world? Just for everyone to serve Him?
Well, I'll give you a couple of analogies. Let's imagine a mother says to her 6-year-old son or daughter, let's bake a cake together. You'll help me bake a cake. Okay. So now they spend a couple of hours baking a cake. Now you tell me, is it easier for the mother sharing the work with the 6-year-old or harder for the mother? Definitely harder. She's not getting any extra efficiency or ease from the fact that the 6-year-old is being dragged along. Now let's take angels. Angels are used for various functions, right? But God creates the angel, and God sustains the angel while the angel is doing something for God. It's sort of like the old Yiddish parable. There's a peddler by the side of the road with a big sack. Somebody comes along with a wagon and says, "You need a ride?" "Where are you going?" "Yes." "Terrific." He climbs on, and the peddler gets into the wagon holding the sack. So the fellow with the wagon says, "You don't have to hold the sack. You put it down." So listen, "You're carrying me. That's enough. I'll carry the sack." But, being on the shoulder of the peddler in the wagon doesn't make it any lighter for the wagon. He's not helping the wagon go by holding it on his shoulder. So let's understand. We're talking about serving God. God's not getting a profit out of this. It's not as if there's more hours of leisure because we're serving him. We're doing something for him, making profit for him so he can go to the beach and enjoy himself, so on and so on. That's not what serving him means. It's more like by serving him, I develop my own abilities, I develop my own capacities, I realize my potential. So God set up a situation in which I'll realize my potential by serving him, just like the 6-year-old. Why does the mother invite the 6-year-old to help with the cake? Because the 6-year-old will learn, what does it mean to measure flour? What does it mean to measure sugar? And what does it mean to mix? And what happens if you put on too much heat? What happens if you put on too little heat? And the child will become more knowledgeable.
So it's not about serving him. It's not like creating the role.
So it's called serving him, just like the mother says to the child, help me make a cake. But the purpose of the mother inviting the child into the process of helping her make the cake is that the child should develop. Now, one of the things that a human being has to do is learn how to deal with his ego. That's fashionable enough that people have heard about it. Right? Ego is a problem. If your orientation is to serve God, then what you're saying is, well, God is more important than I am. That's why it's important for me to serve him. That's already a corrective to the ego. So I'm not everything. Not everything has to bow down to me.
God has an ego. He needs to be served.
No. Does the mother need the service of the 6-year-old? Go back to the analogy. Is the mother's ego asserting itself when she invites the 6-year-old into helping her make the cake?
What does God want from you?
No, come on. What is the mother? What's the case with the mother?
She wants the child to be able to develop and be able to.
Right. She's asking. She says to the child, "Help me make the cake." The words say, "You're helping me." The words say, "You're serving me. You're doing something for me." That's what the words say. What's the truth? The truth is the child is the beneficiary, right? The child's getting the benefit. So when God says, "Serve me," it's like the mother inviting the 6-year-old to help her make the cake. It's not that his ego. It's not doing it for his ego. She's not doing it for her ego either. She's doing it out of care for the child. So when God says to us to serve him, he's not doing it for his ego. He's doing it for us. Just like the mother's doing it for the child.
We should develop to what?
Well, as I said, one thing, we should be free about worshiping our own ego. One way you stop worshiping your ego is to recognize there's something bigger than you. Something bigger and more important than you, more valuable than you. So I'm not the top of the chain.
Let's explain the big picture of why I was.
Okay, but you already see that there can be a reason why God will say, serve me, and it's not because he's getting anything out of it. Not because he's making a profit out of it. This is the creator of the universe out of nothing. What could I possibly give him that he doesn't have? For him. But if he wants me to develop in a certain way, then he wants something that's not for him, it's for me. If he wants it for me, then I can benefit from it. Now, why would it be good for me to serve him? One reason it would be good for me to serve him is to recognize there's something bigger than me in the world, so that I won't worship myself. There was a series of books about 10 years ago, and the motto was, what's in it for number one? What's in it for number one? Everything that you come across in life, you should ask yourself, what's in it for number one? Guess who number one is? Number one is me. And the book is saying, don't be fooled into doing for others and worrying about others. Ask yourself, what's in it for number one, for you? Make sure you're on top. That's a philosophy. That's murder. That's murder. That's suicide. Because you aren't the most important thing in the world. You aren't the most valuable thing in the world. And if you lower your sights and you exercise tunnel vision to see only yourself at the end of the lens, then you've lost out on living in the real world. So God is giving us, among other things, among many other things, is giving us, it means to say, break that tunnel vision, look beyond your tiny horizon, and realize that there are bigger things in the world than you are. That's one of the things that happens when you serve God.
Maybe in the mother's womb gets the shona by after 40 days?
It depends whether it's a Jew or a non-Jew. A Jew gets at birth. A non-Jew gets much earlier, and a Jew gets at birth. It has gigantic consequences because abortion for a non-Jew is murder. An abortion for a Jew is not murder.
After how long?
I don't remember how long it is for the non-Jew, but for a Jew it waits to birth.
Non-Jew also have a
Say again?
Non-Jew also have a show?
The non-Jew what?
Also has a show?
Of course he has a neshama. A non-Jew has free will, and a non-Jew has mitzvos. A non-Jew, if he follows his mitzvos, will go to the world to come. Of course he has a neshama.
Is it a spiritual?
It's not the same, not this identical neshama that a Jew has, but it certainly has a neshama. It's human in that sense, yeah. Anyway, but so what were you?
No, but I thought it's what it is. My question was: let's say someone has everything, is Torah. Why is it considered killing someone if doesn't have a shul?
This question has lots and lots of legs. Chazal use a certain way of talking. And like in any case of literature, you have to learn the literature, read it, and see how the people talk. Chazal have a way of talking in absolute universal terms, and I would say almost never, maybe never, do they mean it in absolute and universal terms. So whenever you see a statement, A is B, the immediate thought that arises in your mind is, in what respect? Maybe it's only the third Thursday of every even ending year, and that's all. Or maybe it's only in color. The statement says A is B, but in our terms it means in some respect or other, in some connection or other, some application or other. So for example, one statement in the Chazal is that the mitzvah of tzitzis, fringes on your garments, is equivalent to all the other mitzvahs combined. Oh really? Let's see. Let's take idol worship, for which you have to die rather than transgress. Do I have to die rather than put on a garment without tzitzis? No, I do not. Is it equivalent to Shabbos, which is a capital crime? I put on a garment without tzitzis is a capital crime? No, it is not. So what do you mean? It's equal to all the other 612 commandments combined. Because in the parsha of tzitzis it says, put the tzitzis on so you remember and perform all the other commandments. Now we see. It's equivalent because it'll remind me and lead me to perform. That's all. That's the only sense in which it's equivalent. There's two verses back to back in the book of Exodus where it says Moses and Aaron. The next one says Aaron and Moses. It says the oral tradition, to teach you they're equal. Now give me a break. Moses and Aaron are not equal. Aaron is not equal to Moses. We know that Moses was the greatest prophet who ever lived or will live. And Maimonides says that Moses was the greatest sage, the wisest person in all the history of mankind. So again, when it says Moses and Aaron are equal, it means equal in a particular respect. There, the respect is the Exodus required both of them to cooperate, to collaborate, without which it wouldn't have taken place. Good. The granddaddy of all of them is a verse in Song of Songs where the king refers to his beloved as Tamasi, which means my pure one. And the Midrash says, don't read Tamasi, ela Ta'omasi, my twin. Now the Song of Songs is a parable of a love between God and the Jewish people. So it comes out that God is saying to the Jewish people, you are my twin. And in case you didn't get it, the Midrash goes on, I am not greater than she, and she's not greater than I. This is the infinite creator talking to a creature. I'm not greater than you. Come on. There's an infinite gulf between God and any creature. But again, it means in some respect. And here the respect is the perfection of the creation depends upon both of us. He gave us free will, and he said, I want it to happen through your efforts with mine, of course. We are partners. Sure, we're not equal partners. 99.999999% for God and 0.0001% for us, but we're necessary. We're necessary. That makes it a partnership, and that's the sense in which we are equal. So when you have a statement in Chazal, you always pare it down, qualify it, and ask in what respect. Now you ask, in what sense is Sem Mission equivalent to murder? You didn't ask that. You said, how could it be murder if it doesn't have a soul yet? Well, let me give you another comparison. Chazal say, if you embarrass someone in public, cause his face to go white, to drain the blood, that's equivalent to killing him. Well, between you and me, it's not a capital crime. You can't be executed for embarrassing somebody in public. So it means it's equivalent to killing him in some respect or other. And the respect here is visibly that his face goes white, blood drains out, and not to you injure his reputation. And his reputation is a serious thing for a person, but of course it's not like putting a bullet through his head. So now, same thing is true here. What you're doing is destroying potential life, as you well know. So that being the case, if you're destroying something which could become life, it's similar in that respect to killing someone, but it's not really killing someone. So the question, how could it be that if it doesn't have a neshama yet, doesn't have a soul yet? That question would only be relevant if you thought, it's really murder. How could it really be murder? But it was never meant to be really murder. It was only similar in a respect that may be enlightening, and that's all. Nothing more than that. But this is a general rule in interpreting the statements in Chazal, in the rabbinic tradition, that that's the way they're written. So much so that Rabbi Yochanan, one of the great Talmudic sages, makes the following remark. He says, Ein lemedi min hakolos. We do not take general statements as precisely true. If the Talmud says all A's are B's, we fully expect that there are exceptions. And then Rabbi Yochanan goes even further. He says, even if the Talmud says all A's are B's except for X, Y, Z, so the Talmud specifies exceptions. And then you say, well, if the Talmud went out of its way to specify exceptions, those must be the only exceptions. Rabbi Yochanan says, no. When the Talmud says all A's are B's except for X, Y, Z, there could be other exceptions also. They're not meant to be universal and absolute. Rabbis did not talk in universal and absolute sense. They used words which in English, to an English reader, sound universal and absolute, but that's not the way they meant them. So you always have to look for where the qualifications lie. You follow me? You see how it applies to your question? This is you have to build a reflex in. When you see a statement and it's abrupt, it's shocking a bit. It sounds too strong. That when you've learned the system, your reaction is, of course it sounds too strong, because I'm falling into the trap of taking it as really universal and really absolute. And it's not meant that way. So what I have to look for is the conditions that qualify it. It's true across the board.
Well, let's say I have a piece of metal, yeah, destroy it.
A piece of metal and?
I destroy it, I cut it off.
Yeah.
You tell me like I just destroy a car, whatever, because you could have made something out of it. I mean, I'm not saying there's a big chance of this bird becoming the human, but
Well, let's take seeds of vegetables or seeds of wheat or something like that. And you live in a world in which people are starving to death. And you take a bag of seeds and you burn it. I don't think it would be far-fetched for someone to say you just destroyed food that could have fed people. Right? Because it was seeds you could have planted in the ground. And you could have fed people with it. Wouldn't be far-fetched. And I don't know if you're aware, but there's a big, very lucrative scrap metal business. People make a lot of money collecting scrap metal and selling it to be reused in automobiles and other things. And one of those people will say, yes, you did. If you destroyed that steel beam, you wasted a natural resource from which I could have made money, because I know where to sell it. I know where people are using things like that. So I think we have a general rule, Bal Tashchis, which means not to destroy any useful item for no purpose. There may be various purposes, but just to destroy it, for the sake of destroying it, we have a rule against that. Well, I'll end with one comment. In the Siddur, it says that God is recreating the world continuously, the universe. Chadesh Tomid Ma'aser Bereishis, continuously recreating the world. Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, great Kabbalists and I would say philosophers of the last 250 years, asked, why is God doing that? Why is he doing that? He could create it and it could run on its own. Nothing stops him. He has the power to do that. And he says, the goal of life, as Luzzatto says in The Way of God, the goal of life is to enter into a relationship with God, interact, be conscious of. And if God creates the world in a way that it runs on its own, and so to speak, he goes on holiday, then he isn't available for a relationship. So, the truth is, God's will is sustaining everything that exists, moment by moment. And that means that every thing is a potential for a meeting with God because His will is in it. It's not running on its own like an automatic machine. And that's what creates the potential for each thing to contribute to that relationship with God. And that includes my past, as we said before, and it includes all the resources in the world, and includes bars of steel. There's bars of steel, or seeds for vegetables, or any item in the world has that potential to contribute to that relationship. The laws of the Torah, to a great extent, tell us how to realize that potential. Sometimes items are hard to analyze. Then you go beyond the laws to the Midrashim or to the Kabbalah, and they fill in the gaps of how to realize the potential of those things. But our attitude is, all of life is meetings. It's meetings with manifestations of God's will, which give us the opportunity to elevate something and use it for that purpose.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
There's a passage that says somewhere that someone who learns Torah is considered the freest person.
It's considered, sorry?
To be the freest person.
It's not a verse. It's Osek b'Torah, ein raben chorin ela osek b'Torah. The only truly free person is one who occupies himself with Torah. It's a statement in the Talmud.
Wait, how's that true or possible if there's so many restrictions?
Let me chew about. Okay, I'll just start this for you because it's a good question. But there are a few things here, philosophical
Does it
terms.
mean like your state of mind?
No. Let's start with something simple, direct, and very fundamental. How can it be that following the Torah makes you free when there's so many restrictions? I'm playing chess. And at a certain point, I take my knight, and I move it 3 spaces straight forward, and I take off the other guy's queen. And he says, "You can't do that." I said, "What do you mean? It's very easy. Watch, I'll show you. I'll do it again. 1, 2, 3, bang, off with your queen." He said, but, that's illegal. That's, Listen, don't give me rules. Don't fence me in. I'm a free bird. I do as I please. That's what I do. I move the horse 3 steps straight forward, and I take off your queen. What will he say? He say, "But that's not chess. That's not chess. Unless you play by the rules, you're not playing the game of chess. The rules of chess make possible a game. If you abandon the rules, you can't play the game. Sometimes rules make things possible for you. They don't take away your flexibility or your alternatives. They create alternatives. Rules create alternatives. I'll give you another more pressing example. Somebody says, "Nobody tells me what to do. Nobody fences me in. Here's how I talk. And blue 3. That's how I talk." Okay. No one tells you what words to use, but you can't communicate that way. And blue 3 doesn't say anything. It doesn't communicate anything. There are rules of language. The rules of language make it possible to communicate. You don't like rules. They fence you in. You want to have your freedom. Okay, you can have your freedom, but then you can't communicate. The rules of language make it possible to communicate. If you think communicating is important, then the rules are giving you the possibility to do something which without the rules you couldn't do. So rules are a two-edged sword. Some rules create possibilities. Rules don't always limit your freedom. Sometimes rules give you freedom. That's something that you should meditate on. You should think about all sorts of examples. And there are practical examples as well. Imagine a society with no traffic rules. How far would you get in your car? Nowhere. The reason you can get somewhere is because half of the road is forbidden to you. A rule, you can't drive on that side of the road. But that's how you get where you're going. Because you drive on this side and they all drive on that side in that direction. And then you can get somewhere. The rule, which cancels half of the road for you, makes it possible for you to travel. There are rules that create possibilities, not just hem you in. Or they create possibilities by denying. By denying certain possibilities, they create other possibilities. So then, when you talk about this, the sum total effect of the rule, what you ought to do is 2 things. First of all, you ought to sort of list up What things does it tell me I can't do, and what things does it make it possible for me to do? And then evaluate them. What's more important to me? What's more valuable to me? Having the freedom to violate the rules, or being able to do what the rules provide? Frankly, between you and me, I really don't want to move my knight 3 steps straight forwards and take off the queen. I have no fulfillment in moving 3 steps straight forward instead of moving like an L. Right? It's trivial, whereas playing chess could be very important. Playing chess is a great challenge, a great entertainment, it's a great skill, develops your thinking capacities. So what the rules make possible is much more important to me than what the rules take away. Same with traffic rules. Without the traffic rules, we wouldn't get anywhere. Certainly the same with communication. I need to communicate with people, and so do you need to communicate with people, as you know very well. So that being the case, you need the rules of language. That could very well be that the rules of the Torah, with all their restrictions, make it possible to achieve something which without those rules you can't achieve. In particular, a certain type of spiritual development. Tell this to someone, tell your idea to someone in India. They'll say to you, are you joking? If I don't sit cross-legged in the Om position for 2 years, I'll never reach the ultimate in meditation. And I want to reach the ultimate meditation. So don't talk about walking on the beach and picking up driftwood and going to the beer and going to the bar and having a beer. Don't talk to me about that. I don't want that freedom. I want meditation. Meditation is the end of 2 years sitting cross-legged on a mat. Right? So rules create possibilities that you wouldn't otherwise have. And if those possibilities are more valuable to you, then you're only free to access those values, to achieve those valuable ends, if you follow the rules. Right? That's why when I started, I said really free. You're only really free if you do that. There's freedom and real freedom. One thing about real freedom is it enables you to achieve something of real value. It's one of the reasons why you could call it real freedom. Okay, that's a start. But that's something which is very profound. It's not my idea. It's well known in philosophy that rules make certain types of effects possible, and you'll find that all of the really important things in life depend on following rules. There's nothing that's completely free, completely unregulated, that's really valuable.